She's annoying.
But again,
she's the Taylor Swift of our generation, bro. Just saying.
Welcome to Music Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Welcome back to Music Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good. I'm excited about this one. Last couple have been pretty good, but I'm particularly excited about this one. We've kind of been kicking around for a while, and I don't know. It's one of those things that you wouldn't call it a genre. You wouldn't call it a niche thing. It's part of rock.
It's obvious, but we've kind of sidestepped it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I'm glad you chipped in because I was struggling with trying a way to put that. Yeah. So we're talking about women in rock, and we're not talking like Alanis Morissette rock. We're talking like rock, like hard rock, rock and metal, yeah, and alternative, because there was a pretty good stint in the '90s that my wife plays bass. She's big into as she calls it, angry chick music, and there's a lot of that stuff that I listened to as well in the '90s, and so we'll kind of kick into that. But
that stuff doesn't count though.
It does in my book. In my book. No. You can say all you want, but
some of the ones I have are probably skirting the line of reality anyway. Probably, I don't know.
Well, we'll see. But yeah, we're going to kind of talk about, where they've come from, where they started, where it started, how they've influenced, music in general and rock in general, and
chicks that can wail, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And, Mike, I would say that if there's a pinnacle for me, personally, and maybe musically, for people our generation, I would say Lita Ford is like the pinnacle of that whole,
rocker chick thing.
Yeah, I would say that if we're going with what you were saying, I would say that's kind of the pinnacle of it. She played one of the most famous, groups ever to start kind of the women in rock, which is the Runaways. Yeah. And then, huge hits in the late 80s, early 90s, duet with Ozzy Osbourne.
That was on the last podcast. Don't say it.
Yeah, you're right. It was on the last podcast. Oh. Yeah, if I say it, I got to put it on the Spotify list. So no, I'll leave it off.
Right.
But I'll say that's, like I said, that's, if I think of the pinnacle for me, that's the pinnacle for me.
Yeah. And again, these are it's opinion. You can argue all you want. I mean, it is what we used to go to the Oldsmar flea market. We used to buy posters and stuff, and I'm sure one or both of us had a Lita Ford poster at some point. She was hot, and she'd shred on the guitar, and
she was in like all the magazines. And it wasn't like she was in there because they were, there's a female playing rock. Her songs were making hits. It wasn't like you just throw her in there because it's female. Her songs were hitting. She was making big money, big songs in the '90s.
Yeah,
the Runaways.
Well, right. The Runaways, that spawned Joan Jett also. If you're going to say Lita Ford, you almost have to say Joan Jett almost in the same breath. Not the same. I don't think the same caliber because they were different. I'd say different type, different genre, a little bit different genre of rock. But Joan Jett can hold her own with, with the boys too. She can.
I would say that it's, I
bet she has more hits than Lita Ford, actually, probably radio hits.
Oh boy,
I would bet money on it.
I'll have to do some research on that afterwards, but I would say that I think Joan Jett carried the classic rock throughout, and kind of stayed in that classic rock vein.
I would say the radio rock anthem. She was, right. or not anthem, but the radio rock genre. I Hate Myself for Loving You, and that's it's just. I love rock and roll. What are you going to do? Those are staples in classic rock, popular rock, any kind of, radio. Contemporary. Even radio it plays it still to this day. So
So let's break it back down though. Let's talk about why we're talking about women in rock. Why we have to talk about that. Are we saying that we have to set them aside?
Oh no. We've been talking. Well, I know we're different, but I think we've been wanting to do this. We've just been trying to scrape together enough stuff, I think, or maybe just I don't know why. I don't know why we were avoiding it, but they're as predominant. I mean, female singers. I mean, going back to again, if we use Elvis's appearance on Ed Sullivan as like the birth of rock and roll, for lack of a better genesis, but
yeah.
No, I mean, female artists have held their own in any. I mean, there's a couple of them on my list that hold their own in like really hardcore metal, and there's ones that obviously the higher ranges. I mean, several years ago when I saw Boston, they had a female like on stage to hit the higher notes that the guy they got singing for him now couldn't hit. Could not get Brad Delp's range, so they had a female to hit the like kind of backing vocals, and he would kind of taper off and she would kind of fade in at the higher notes type of thing. So I think that's not demeaning the females in position. I'm just saying that they're obviously a different sound, but I don't think they're a different genre or anything like that. I think they fit in, and
I think that's why don't mean to cut you off, but I think that's what you said right there is why we've kind of skirted this for lack of better words, this subject, because we didn't. I don't want to make it like we're doing this because they're a standout or we have to set them aside. Yeah. I want to do it because, like you said, there's a different sound. You can't deny that when a male singer and a female singer get on stage, it's going to be a different sound.
I mean, I've got at least a dozen, on my list that are standout. I mean, and I think. I think most of the female I think rock in general, I mean, it was always kind of the boys club type of thing. So I think radio and record labels, I think, kind of paraded them around as like almost like a sideshow. And they have had to fight. They have had to fight in this realm, rock and metal, especially. I mean, there's always going to be standouts. I mean, in certain things, but I mean that you can't deny.
So you talked about Elvis a few minutes ago, and we've talked about that before as well. But so where does it start? I mean, if you're talking about Elvis, obviously he's kind of listed as rock and roll.
Yeah, whatever.
So is Aretha Franklin kind of the start of where bands like, the Runaways and Heart and those kind of got their kick up from?
No, I don't think it was that
Tina Turner?
early. No, I don't. Maybe Ike and Tina. But see, that was kind of more of a duet when Proud Mary and stuff. I mean, you could probably, you certainly have to include her in this conversation. I mean, as far as impact and longevity, if nothing else. I mean, she's in her 70s and still touring to this day. But I don't know. That's something that would have to be looked a little deeper. I mean, I know we're just going to scratch the surface, and by all means, to the listeners, musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com. Hit us up, give us your ideas and the women that we've omitted unintentionally from this list. But that being said, I think it has to be a little bit newer. I mean, I say like Janis Joplin, like 70s era.
So I don't. Yeah. Yeah, so
I mean, she was.
We'll get on that blues. In a minute.
Well, I mean, I think she's more blues, but I think you kind of have to get that.
Well, a lot of Elvis's early stuff was kind of based on blues as well. So
right, I know blues and rock are like peanut butter and chocolate. I mean, one kind of bred the other one, so to speak, for the most part. But I mean, I don't think Aretha Franklin. albeit talented, a female artist, I don't think it goes back that far as rock, like true rock and even metal especially. Not that metal goes back that far even, but I mean.
So where are we? Are we at Heart? Are we at Stevie Nicks? Or
yeah, I mean, if you can, I mean, Stevie Nicks was early 70s. I mean, and Janis Joplin was, late 60s. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, Stevie Nicks and, I mean, Ann Wilson's like, I flip number 1 and 2 a lot, but Ann Wilson for Heart is one of the most influential female singers in rock to me. I think she's still one of the best female singer performers in the business. So, and talk about hits and impact on other, they were mid 70s. I mean, what, 74 or 5, I think, when their first album was out.
Who, Heart?
Yeah.
I'll look it up. Keep talking. I'll look it up.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's so, I mean, there's a small window there, I think late 60s, early 70s, when female performers technically, started really coming up. Debbie Harry, Blondie, I mean, they're probably...
Okay, hold on. So are we including her in rock? Because technically she's listed as punk.
Debbie Harry? Well, I mean, punk, rock, metal. I mean, this is kind of...
Well, but so there are going to be purists out there that if we were getting regular mail, on a regular basis coming in, there's going to be purists out there that are going to say Aretha Franklin does not fit.
No, absolutely not. I agree with that.
Why? I think she does. I think that she actually, that for me, I think she kickstarted it. I think that when we're looking at Elvis as a starter person for garnering the sound of rock and roll, I think Aretha Franklin is the one that kickstarted women in rock and roll, that gave them that out to be accepted just as well as men in rock and roll at that point. And that's my opinion. And, you can argue with me if you want, but but bands like Heart took that feeling, put songs together. Like if you took Barracuda and put a guy singing on that song, it's the same exact music, it wouldn't work. It just would not sound the same. And obviously it's because we've heard it 100 times with her singing it. But I think that they get to play with something different that men don't get to play with. They get to play in a range, well, till the 90s, they get to play in a range of singing that men don't get to play with. And, if you listen to like the Runaways or, Joan Jett and Lita Ford and stuff, and you listen to the rock that they were creating, some of that was no different than what the guys were creating at the time anyways. Like if you listen to Cherry Bomb by the Runaways and listen to something like the first Motley Crue album or early Kiss, those songs, if you take the vocals out, they're not much different.
Right, but they're in the same time frame too.
Well, that's what I'm saying though, is I think that the Aretha Franklin being earlier than them and standing out is what put them in that feel that they could do the same thing at the same time frame. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid argument. I mean, respectfully disagree to a point. I mean, I see where I get what you're getting at, but I mean, I think it's like I have trouble stretching Elvis into what we listen to now. He's the king of rock and roll, supposedly, or whatever. So I know we use that. It's kind of tongue in cheek, but at this point, I mean, it's kind of, yes, I guess he ushered in an era, but I mean, did the British invasion, take that over? Do we have to consider like the Beatles, the Who, the Stones? Do they have to consider that the earliest forms of true rock and roll?
I guess let me think how to say this. I guess what I think, I try and put myself in the head of somebody like Jimmy Page or Paul Rodgers or anybody that, were coming up in that 70s rock as a kid looking at Elvis as a kid watching Elvis on TV and, hearing that heavy beat, that quick beat, and him singing and yelling almost. I mean, if you listen to some of his stuff, he's almost screaming in some of his stuff. So I try and put myself in the head of those guys who are looking at as young age going, wow, I want to do that. And then when they get to that age where they can start learning guitar or singing, or they even
they take it to the next level.
They take it to that next level. And that's what I was saying with Aretha Franklin is, maybe young Lita Ford and young Joan Jett are sitting at home and they're watching the TV and they're seeing Aretha Franklin doing what was
Respect or
Proud
something.
Mary,
Tina Turner,
or Tina Turner doing Proud Mary, and going, wow, that she's out there, she's rocking it, she's on stage. And that's where I talk about when I say I think Elvis started. I think that he is the catalyst that moved music into a new feel. And
but I think I am gonna cut you off intentionally because I think we've talked about this before, and I didn't want to let it pass that time frame. There's such a small window. Like we use grunge as an example. There's like a 3 or 4 year window where that music doesn't work before or after, obviously.
Yeah, true.
For the most part. So I think when you talk, the Runaways, they didn't have anything else to compare it to. So yes, almost by default, someone like Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner has to be a catalyst for a young woman. Now, when you get, 10 years further up, and the Runaways are influential, or Heart and so on and so forth are influential to these singers now. I think it's by context, it's by timing and by context. And I think, like you said, you could take some of the Runaways songs and put a male vocalist in there and it would work. You can't do that with Heart song, obviously, like Magic Man, it kind of changes the whole deal. But it's just it's a thing where you have to acknowledge your influences. So if by default, I think the Runaways would have to use Tina Turner and Aretha Franklin as influences because they didn't have anything else. So yes, by making your point for you, yes, it would almost have to be, but sort of more or less by default because they took it to another level because they didn't have any other influences.
But they carved a roadway for 80s and 90s and now. And, I know you're going to go with Evanescence. I know that's going to come out at some point in time in your list.
Well,
So, but for me, that next step past that Heart and, Stevie Nicks and Joan Jett and even Lita Ford, Blondie fits, I don't know, in the middle of those. I'm not sure where she fits. I don't ever tend to include her, but
I don't know. We say fit. This where I thought. I mean, I'm using this as influential women in rock and metal and so on and so forth. I mean, you have to mention Debbie Harry as part of that because Blondie was big.
Well, and we kind of skipped over Grace Slick too, which
Well, yeah. Well, there again, late '60s. She was Woodstock with like true. Janis Joplin. So, I mean, are they the Janis Joplin /
You know what?
Because they were only a couple of years before the Runaways.
Maybe I'll give that to you. I don't like it, but maybe I'll give that to you. That maybe Janis Joplin and Grace Slick are the catalyst. But again, if you look at the difference between what Elvis was doing and what Led Zeppelin was doing,
sure,
it's a big
but
gap.
Look at the difference of what Janis Joplin was doing and what even the Runaways were doing. I mean, really, Janis Joplin was pretty mellow. I mean, bluesy.
Yeah.
Nothing like the Runaways. The Runaways were, pushing that New York punk scene, as much as rock too.
So we move from the 70s into the 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, and we start getting people like Lita Ford and like I said, Blondie kind of goes through that. There are a couple outside wins at that point, like the Eurythmics. Do we consider that rock or is that more pop?
See, like
B-52s? I mean, is that...
Well, yeah, like Belinda Carlisle, the Go-Go's.
Go-Go's.
I mean, the Go-Go's were considered rock, right?
They were in the rock. I mean, when you went to the slot where rock was, the Go-Go's were in the under the G.
And you have to acknowledge their input because they had, I bet they had half a dozen number one songs.
But I'm going to say this. You're going to hate me. A bunch of people that listen to our podcast are going to hate me. But I think they set women back in rock. I think the B-50. Oh, you do? Okay. Well, dang it. We're supposed to argue every once in a while. You know that, right?
No, I do agree because it was campy and it was, I mean, I'm a little bit of a Go-Go's fan. I mean, the infighting and the drugs and everything else to deal with that band, or they partied like boys, but I think their bubblegum style of rock and radio
B-52s and too. Yeah.
But Annie Lennox is kind of an enigma. You can't really,
let's keep her out of this. She can stay on the outside.
Yeah. I don't want to drag because she's incredibly influential and beyond talented. So, but
she was the female David Bowie as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and if you've never seen her do that duet with David Bowie of Under Pressure, look that up because that'll change your life.
I'll see if I can find that and add that to the list.
But yeah, no, I think I agree to a certain extent. I mean, they ushered in a new level of accessibility, but as far as the actual music and talent was concerned, it was the Monkees, the female version of the Monkees, I think.
Oh, that's a pretty good way of putting it.
And I like the Go-Go's.
Well, so again, we're kind of at that point, at that peak where I was talking about my peak, Lita Ford, where, in the rock scene, she was kind of it. I mean, you had, what's her name from the German girl that sang Doro
from Warlock,
from Warlock.
Who else? Wow, yeah. Kind of no comparison there either, really.
But the B-52s and the Go-Go's are taking this other pop route that are really kind of saying, oh well, this is what it's going to be. I guess we don't care about these other ones that are in rock. Yeah. So, and then you don't see kind of a resurgence until after the 90s. Till you get like in the early 90s, or not after the 90s, after the 80s. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just say like Vixen. That like as far as like they were in the thick of the hair metal. Janet. What was her name? She's got a solo career. So, I mean, she's still making decent music.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. I just can't think of her name.
But I mean, they had 4 or 5 decent hits. I say decent hits for hair. I mean, in the hair metal genre,
metal, right?
I mean, they stood out, but I mean, they were all. I mean, they looked just like. They looked like Winger at the time. I mean, so it's hard to tell. It was hard to tell back then.
Yeah, I was going to say, but Poison, Winger, Warrant, you couldn't really tell them.
But that was all. That was right. I mean, they all had lipstick on and teased hair, so it wasn't really much of a challenge.
But yeah, so you get that kind of drop off in the late '80s where they start going a little bit more pop, and I feel it takes away from their influence and their ability to kind of compete and be equal. And then in the early mid 90s, a couple bands started popping up for me because at that point in time, I was kind of absorbing all the music I could. And one of them that stood out for me was the Breeders. I was a huge Breeders fan.
The Twins.
Yeah. I am seriously, that's still an album that will sit on my top 25 list regularly because that whole,
Last Splash album.
The Last Splash album will fit on there. L7 at the time was making really good.
Oh yeah. And Veruca Salt.
Yeah, Veruca Salt. That was the next one on my list. But you had those kind of, and then you got that dip over with Alanis Morissette and Tori Amos and and try to keep it down.
You know what? Alanis Morissette is very talented. Boy,
she is.
She's annoying.
But again,
she's the Taylor Swift of our generation, bro. Just saying.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat? I was gonna say, can you repeat the whole thing, because that needs to be the quote.
Alanis Morissette is the Taylor Swift of our generation.
That's there. That we're good now. We got
and there you are.
But bands like that, again, I felt like got overshadowed because you had like Tori Amos, and it was the one that does the song over the dog commercial that I can't stand that they're used.
Believe me, if somebody had a gun to my head, I couldn't help you.
Yeah, but I feel like all those pop singers then kind of took away like the Breeders and L7 and all that stuff again.
That's kind of what rock and metal did to grunge.
That's true.
They took that talented women vocalist performers, singers, songwriter, musicians, and turned them into Tori Amos and Alanis Morissette.
Okay, so I need you to take your personal opinions out of this next statement when I ask. Hole.
Overrated.
Well, okay, but in the conversation we're having.
Yes, influential. You have to. I mean, Courtney Love is. I think she pulled. This will be the new lead in. Trigger. No, I think she pulled the trigger. No.
Look, metaphorically, I might agree with you on that.
Almost realistically.
Yeah.
No.
That's a whole nother conversation for like another day.
And that's a really bad pun. Yeah. But no. Yes, influential in the fact that but I think she rose out of his ashes, for lack of a better term. I mean, like she basically, the only notoriety she had was she was married to him, I think. And that's the only reason there was any kind of even sort of popularity. I mean, but they played the hell out. She had one song, I remember. Again, if they had a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you the name of the song, but I mean, you have to acknowledge the influence. I mean, she was, I don't know. I mean, but you have to say Amy Winehouse too in the same kind of breath,
dude.
But I mean, as far as women and influential women, I mean, short career, but
let me steer it back the other way then. So about the same time that Hole was doing whatever garbage. I mean, Manson has got a voice.
Yeah. I don't know if that falls into. I don't know if that falls into to the rock necessarily.
Garbage.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, they couldn't have picked a more appropriate name in my book, but what's the one with? What's that? Is she the one that wore like the duck dress or something there? To the one award show. What?
No, that's Bjork.
Yeah, I mean,
please do not confuse Shirley Manson.
No, I know, but I mean, there has to be, to bring these women up that are in popular, they are of some notoriety as far as women in rock or women in music, the modern music industry, as it were. They almost have to be mentioned, but I mean, talent and popularity aside, I mean, yes, we're opinionated, and I'm not a fan of garbage. I mean, but I never really got into them because that style of music, that time frame of music, I was way the other way in the mid 90s, early mid 90s. So I don't, I mean, but again, it's just like Courtney Love. You have to respect, you can hate the player, just don't hate the game. You know what I mean? She's influential as far as she's a woman in rock, and her talent level aside, I mean, she made an impact. You know what I mean? So
I skipped over a couple kind of in that genre of actual musicians. I mean,
we'll say them.
Well, Sheila E., I mean, playing with Prince, musicians that stood out that probably didn't get enough notoriety. But I just kind of wanted to mention that, that it doesn't have to be a front the person on the front of the stage that's singing.
Right.
That can be it. It can be anything around,
But she had her hits in her own right too.
True.
Singing
That's
too.
true. So then we kind of move out of the 90s, at late 90s, early 2000s, and you get what? I mean, Donna's.
Yeah, she's on Brett.
Go ahead.
Brett Anderson's on my list from the Donnas. That was mid 90s though. I mean, that was
it early? I thought it was later.
I thought it was like 96.
Might be.
But there was Lacey Strum from Flyleaf, maybe, but that's early 2000s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they actually started in 93. You're right. I don't know when their first album was released, but
yeah, the Donnas you're talking.
Yeah. 97 was their first album though, so it was late 90s before they got an album out. But Flyleaf was one that was kind of on my list as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like it's fallen off. Like there's not either a girl band or a front singer other than, well, I know you want to do Amy. Go ahead. Throw her in there.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, in this century, from 2000s, more than the last 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
Amy Lee and Evanescence, have definitely been a huge influence in rock and metal.
Oh yeah.
Again, an undeniable force. Morgan Lander, that Canadian metal group Kitty that I still to this day hooked on. I still, it's to hear a girl do the guttural stuff is really trippy to me.
It is weird.
Yeah, no, it's weird. But the music is what drives me. I love the rhythm. But then and basically now, yeah, I agree with you. Other than Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm, what's really out there?
There's
the radio pimps, you know what I mean? What's, again, the Hailstorm, they play our 98 Rock here in greater Tampa Bay area plays Hailstorm a lot, but
let me throw what my thought process is on this. Why I kind of wanted to lead up to, time frames and get up to this time frame was, is it because it's not in favor anymore? Or is it really because of what we talked about before, that rock is dying?
Well,
is it more that?
No, I really think in this day and age, we've been over this, that short attention span. And secondly, they cannot find other than, and this is not my thought. I'm saying this is not how I think about it, but I think the music industry, they have to be able to sell it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately she has to be hot and talented.
Yeah.
Because guys, they just have to be talented. Look at i.e. Meatloaf. Okay. But I think women.
That's so right and so wrong at the same time. Sorry.
My buddy Sean that listens to this, he'll appreciate that, dude.
Well, look at no. Again, I'm not pointing fingers or saying anything, but if you look at a band, like you said, the looks. Lita Ford was big in her time, and she's attractive. If you look at the Donnas, they're not Keisha. They're not what's Cardi B. They're not overly attractive or just out there for their. I'm going to say it. Yes, out there for their looks.
Well, I think most of the female artists find it easier to go into the pop dance scene scenario because it's a lot easier to make money, to make it big.
Yeah.
And to make money at it. I hate, it does boil down to that to an extent.
But again, is it because rock is dying? That why would you go into rock if there's really no money in it?
No, because the artists, and God bless Jeff Young for saying it. The artists that matter, the artists that want to, that actually care about the music, make the music that they want to make. So these factory of stupidness, the Ariana Grandes and so on and so forth, they have to be. They're paraded. I mean, Debbie Gibson. Back to Debbie Gibson, the mall tours in the '80s, and what was your girlfriend there? The redhead.
Oh, stop.
No, what the other one? I mean, they did mall tours and stuff. They were paraded around as eye candy first, and then if they had any talent, that was a bonus. And man, I think it's still a lot of that going around. In the music industry, I think that's still a big deal. I think you have to be
hold
like
on.
Lizzie Hale.
Okay,
I think you have to be overly talented to make it doing what you want to do in the rock and metal scene as far as a female artist goes.
So let's step that back one step and then talk about people like Christina Aguilera or
Britney Spears.
Well, I honestly don't think she has very much talent. Christina Aguilera has an amazing amount of talent.
Oh, agreed. What about like Gwen Stefani, though?
And that's what I'm saying is when you look at musicians or pop musicians that get put into those positions because they're, you want to sell something, you want to put somebody on the front of the album, and then, you get one or two albums and then they're gone. But
because they auto-tune and crap like that.
And that's what I'm saying, though. So why do we not get a good, like what Christina Aguilera did after, her pop albums? I don't know if you listen to any of it, but it's amazing. I mean, it's talent, raw talent. What's her name?
She's an incredible singer.
Yes. God, I'm blanking on the name of the girl it was just in the movie, the music movie. I talked about her a lot. Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. Yeah.
I could care less for the first stuff she put out. It was horrible. It was trash. It was beat music. It was house music. But, to listen to her sing by herself with a piano, I'm blown away. To hear her sing the Star Spangled Banner, I'm blown away. Why do I have to wait through 7 different pop musicians to get the one or two that are really good?
I think it's the record deal, because it's the radio record industry still holding them back. I mean, as far as rock goes, because even if they want to make a rock record, I mean, like I snuck her in there. Gwen Stefani, no doubt, was 85% punk, with some reggae splashed in, and but they went pop, and she married Gavin Rossdale, and she became, and then it was a big deal.
So it's interesting you brought her up. So you listen to that song, I'm Just a Girl. Whew. Yeah. That kind of sums up all of what we're talking about, doesn't it?
Right. No, and that's exactly why I brought her up. I was waiting for the end because of that. Because of when it gets to this point, I honestly believe that the music industry is holding them back. If they're pretty, no, we need you to dance and choreograph some crap on stage and wear skimpy outfits, and we're going to sell it like that. And if you're 18, 19, 20, 22, 25, 27 or 45, I'm sorry, but money's money. You know what I mean? Yeah. It would be hard to turn it down. If you're a struggling artist, or if you're like Christina and Britney, they were on the Mickey Mouse Club thing, and along with some of these other boy band trash. You have to admit, no matter what, the amount of influence Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, this new one, Ariana Grande, and the other one that was dating Justin Bieber there for all, I couldn't tell you her name either. But there's the pop the female pop influence, I think, is probably tenfold what the female rock influence is.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 100%. And I think I skipped over some of the more outside bands in the in the 90s as well, like Elastica and Belly and stuff that my wife listens to, but you never heard of them. So you're right. I think that's spot on.
Right. Well, again, you have to at least admit the influence, whether we like it or not, or whether the music's good or not. It's like Courtney Love and Britney Spears, to me, are blonde women that make noise come out of their mouth, and that's as far as I get with them. So, but they're definitely totally different genres. But you have to acknowledge the influence that they have put into the genre of music as a whole.
Exactly.
Again, really bad pun again, but
no. I think but you're just like full of the bad ones tonight.
No, I know.
But I think if you also look back at I'm not a huge Kiss fan of the early stuff. I just not. I mean, I like one or two songs of theirs off their early stuff and a couple in the 80s, but that's it. But there is absolutely no denying that they've changed the surface of rock forever.
Oh, yeah.
With the face paint and the shtick and everything that they had going on. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan. And there are people that are not a huge fan of Led Zeppelin. There are people that don't like AC/DC, that don't like Led Zeppelin or ZZ Top, or there are people that don't like those bands, but have to respect what they did for that particular either genre or sound or type of musician, whatever.
Absolutely.
So it's hard to deny.
It's a lot smaller, shallower pool as far as females in rock and metal.
Yeah.
And I mean, go ahead. I noticed a lot of them are overseas, like Dutch and German metal bands, as far as female fronted metal bands and rock bands. Obviously, like we said, Doro there from Warlock, he made it big over here. And there's a few other ones, but like you said, most of them you haven't heard of. And I do believe that's because of the music industry, because of that. I mean,
I know you're saying that, but I think it's also because rock is so far down on the like list for most people right now. I think it's such a small group of people that really like hard rock anymore, that if you take, the female in rock as say 5%, of the musicians in the 80s and 90s, 5% of, 2000 is a pretty big number. You've got how many decent rock bands right now? Like 50. Yeah. So when you take that 5% of that, you're looking at like one, maybe two bands that can sustain a good female rock driven band, like the whole band being, female, or even a front. Even a singer out front at this point is even, taking a chance. Well, Evanescence was good with Amy Lee in front, if you put a female singer in front of a male band right now, it's really not going to go anywhere at this point. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. And it's unfortunate because I miss those times. I love listening to the Donnas. I loved listening to the Breeders. I love those types of bands. So,
but I think you just tipped the scale to my point where the money is in pop. That's why the female artists, it's easier. You don't the touring is, every third night, and the concerts are at 7:00 at night, and they're over by 10 because of noise curfew.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And they sip herbal teas, and they don't have to, smoke cigarettes and drink Jack Daniels and, play rock and roll,
Well,
which,
we'll tie it up, but I'm going to throw one at you. It's not really a parting shot because we've kind of hit all the hole was really the one I wanted to throw at you. It fit in the time frame that I was talking about. Is the only reason I brought it up. But so I didn't look at too many lists because I really wanted to go off just my knowledge and my feel for females in rock, and I didn't want to do too much diving because again, my wife plays bass and she loves, as she calls it, angry chick music. And so I've heard a lot of weird stuff from the 80s and 90s, but one kept popping up And I even went back and listened to a couple songs, and I'm like, I just don't get it. Bonnie Raitt.
Extremely talented, slide guitar player, if nothing else.
Well, guitar player in general. I mean, that's one of the things they mentioned in most of the articles is that she could have been a rock player. Should have been a rock player. Some of her stuff even sounds like rock, but she's listed.
I think the same thing about Roy Clark. Man, did he miss his calling?
Well, that's true. We've talked about that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going on that road.
But I just don't see it as an influence on rock guitarists. But it's funny, like I said, even some of the female artists that I looked into listed her as an influence, and I'm like,
no, I'm just gonna say, I think
don't get it.
Well, I'm not saying I get it, but I didn't get Gladys Knight or Aretha Franklin, as far as I didn't get that reach either. But I think female rock artists have to reach for female influences.
I guess.
So Bonnie Raitt isn't that far of a stretch.
Ooh, so that brings up a really good point. So what do female rock musicians today have to look for or look at? Do they have to look all the way back? Do they have to go back to the 70s and 80s? Because there's nothing for them to look at that's in the last 10 years. Amy Lee in the last, 20. But as far as like guitar players or musicians, I mean, the Donnas really was the only one that I could think of that stood out.
Yeah. Again, Hailstorm is big right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And
but that's a female-led male band,
yes,
though, isn't it?
Yes, correct. Yes. But I think female artists that want to be in rock and do rock, I think find solace in Ann Wilson, Lita Ford. I think they find solace in Grace Slick, those really, really powerful female women singers, guitar players. I think there's such a small niche for it, and we tried not to put it in a niche, but
yeah,
I think there's such a small pool to draw from. Like, as far as if I'm a female artist looking for female influence, you're right, there's not a lot to draw from.
Not current, right?
So you do have to pull from Tina Turner, Janis Joplin, Blondie. You do have to pull from that. Because and there are tons and tons that we haven't mentioned, that we don't even know. They, like you said, that are obscure and so on and so forth. And this is more of a influential rock type of podcast as far as women go for this one, but there's not a deep pool of super popular, super longevity having careers of female artists, let alone full bands of women. Even Heart is, Ann and Nancy, and then the rest is guys.
Right. True.
So, I mean, as far as female bands are concerned, I think that's even a smaller niche.
Yeah.
But female artists in rock is a little bit more to deal with. And again, I know we're missing, hundreds probably, but but there again, you have to get more obscure. If we're talking about influential women in rock and metal, it's a pretty small circle. I mean, you can draw, you wouldn't go through a whole pencil lead, circle on all of them. So,
well, yeah, you've mentioned the email address already, that if people want to reach out to us and, tell us how they feel about it.
Not if you want to, you have to.
No, yeah, exactly.
If you're listening
Engage.
to this, yeah, tell us who we left out.
Seriously. And what you think too, because we don't want just your list. We don't want your, hey, you guys missed this band. tell us why. Tell us why, female musicians that are picking up a guitar today should look at this band. What's the reason for it? Did they get influenced by somebody? Are they should be the next influential person that influences somebody to pick up a guitar and start playing and play rock music. So not just your list. Give us what you want, man. And we want to hear it. We'll respond. I certainly will respond via email. And so send it to us and we will definitely do it.
Yeah, definitely.
But that about ties up. Go ahead.
musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com. I said it earlier and I'm saying it again. So hit us up.
Yeah, we'll get that at the exit too. But yeah, that's all we look for, man. We're not doing this to make money. We're not doing this to get rich off it. We're doing it because we love to talk about music, and we just want to hear what you guys had to say about music too. So
absolutely,
and leave us some feedback. Leave us some feedback on whatever platform you listen to, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you guys are listening to. Leave us a review. I don't care if it's bad. I mean, if you don't like what we do, tell us why. We can change it. We can look at different ways of doing things. So,
but go back and listen to some of the old podcasts. We had Jeff Young from Megadeth and Music Without Boundaries. I mean, there's
Pete
a lot of
from
stuff.
Sea of Tranquility.
Sea of Tranquility. We've had some guests. We've had some really cool people on here. We've had some really and just Craig and I have some really awesome podcasts too. Just me and him, if you can believe that.
No,
so,
I don't.
So go download some of the other ones, some of the older ones. Check the whatever the title is usually a pretty good giveaway, but this has got to be there's about 45 to choose from, so including this one. So go check us out, download it, and then hit us up on the Gmail account and let us know what you think, what you heard, what you want, what you need, and what we got. And it's all good.
Cool. Thanks, brother. We'll catch up to you in a little bit.
All right.
See ya.
We'll see you.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, Sybert.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.